Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic today that's got a lot of you fired up: Apple and their data practices.
Yeah, you guys sent in a mountain of research. Clearly, you want to get to the bottom of how Apple's privacy policies really work.
We hear you, so we're going deep on this one.
And honestly, there's a lot to unpack. Apple's got this image, right? The privacy champions of the tech world.
So then you start digging into their legal documents and,
Yeah.
things get a little interesting.
Yeah, interesting is one way to put it.
Like this whole Apple advertising thing. I mean, they love to remind us they don't rely on ad revenue the way some other companies cough might.
Right, they're all about selling you products, not personal data, supposedly.
But you found out that's not quite the whole story.
Not exactly. Apple does use your data for targeted ads.
And they're not exactly hiding it either.
Well, you have to know where to look. Buried in those terms and conditions we all skip over.
Yeah, exactly. And these ads, they're not just tucked away in some obscure corner of the internet. You pointed out they're popping up in the App Store, Apple News,
Even the Stocks app, of all places.
where those targeted ads could be really effective. So how does it work? They just lump us into broad categories like tech enthusiast or whatever.
It's more sophisticated than that. They use what they call segments. These are groups of at least 5,000 users with similar traits and behaviors.
Okay, so like, what kind of traits are we talking about here? What are they using to group us?
A lot of things, actually. Your device type, the language you use, even if you've enabled parental controls. Oh, and this one's kind of wild.
What's that?
They might infer your gender based on how you write your name.
Like how formal you are.
Yeah. Exactly. Dear Robert versus Dear Body. Little things like that.
Wow. I mean, it makes sense. They're analyzing everything. And obviously, they're keeping tabs on what we download, right?
Yeah.
How else would they target those app ads so well?
You're right, they do track app downloads. But there's a catch. They distinguish between sharing individual apps and broader app categories.
So they know I'm into language learning apps, but not that I specifically downloaded Duolingo.
Exactly. Unless, of course, Duolingo is the one serving you the ad.
Okay, so kind of a gray area there. But you know what I find interesting? About this ad button.
Most people ignore that thing.
Right, but you're saying it's worth a closer look.
It's one of the few places Apple actually gives you a peek behind the curtain. You can see which segments they use to target you with that specific ad.
Huh. So they are being somewhat transparent, at least when it comes to their ad platform. Makes you wonder what other data they're collecting that we don't hear about.
The million-dollar question. And that's what we'll be digging into next.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it. Like,
Yeah.
We're trying to lock down our data, but even the lock needs a key. And Apple's one holding on to that key.
Right. It's all about trust. We're handing over the keys to our digital lives, hoping they'll be responsible with them, even when we don't know exactly what they're doing.
Speaking of trust, you flagged a few other things in those documents that really caught my eye. Activity sharing, Apple Fitness, even our Safari browsing data. Seems like nowhere's really off limits, huh?
You're not wrong. It's not necessarily that they're trying to be shady or anything.
No, of course not.
Apple wants to give you that smooth, personalized experience across all your devices, right?
Makes sense.
And data is how they make that happen. It's the fuel for the whole system.
Okay, but how much fuel do they need? Like in this document you sent, improve safety features. Sounds intense. They're analyzing my every move for safety. What is this? Minority Report.
Think about what we were saying about advanced data protection. Even with that turned on, they still need data to make sure those safety features actually work, right?
Right, to make sure those features are doing their job.
This document just shows how they use our data, all anonymous and combined, to make those features better all the time.
Can you give me an example? How does this play out in the real world?
Let's say you lose your phone.
Ugh, the worst.
But luckily, you've got Find My set up. So behind the scenes, Apple's looked at data from tons of users who used Find My. They want to know what works best in different situations.
So like maybe they learned that a sound alert is super helpful in a loud place, but a message on the screen works better if you left it at a friend's house.
Exactly. They look for patterns, not individual cases. By knowing how people use the feature and what helps them find their stuff, they can tweak things to make Find My even better for everyone.
So it's not so much about spying on us, but more about making their system smarter as a whole.
That's the general idea. But we gotta remember, even when data's anonymous, there are still risks. The more companies collect, the bigger the chance something goes wrong.
A data breach, or maybe those algorithms they're so proud of.
Yeah.
It's not working right.
Exactly. And that's where it gets really tricky. We say we care about privacy, but we also love personalized stuff. It's convenient, Makes us feel like our devices are looking out for us.
That's the irony, isn't it? We want that seamless, secure experience. But how much of our privacy are we willing to give up for it?
That's the question, isn't it?
And that's the million-dollar question. Where do we draw the line?
Right.
We love it when companies like Apple know enough to make our lives easier, right, safer, more connected.
Right.
But
We don't want to feel like every little thing we do is being analyzed, like someone's watching us all the time.
or that our data is being used for things we never agreed to. It's a tough balance.
Definitely. And it's not just Apple, right? This goes for pretty much every tech company these days. They're all using our data to personalize and improve their stuff.
It's kind of like this hidden engine driving the entire digital world.
Yeah, and most of us are just along for the ride, Not really sure what's going on under the hood.
That's why I'm glad we're talking about this. We got to understand how these companies operate.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. Right?
Exactly. The more we know, the better choices we can make about our own data. It's not about swearing off technology altogether, going off the grid.
Right. You don't have to become a hermit.
But we can be smarter about it. Yeah. We can pay attention to what we're sharing, the permissions we're giving away.
And that about this add button we talked about, that's actually a step in the right direction.
It is. Shows that even these giant tech companies, the ones swimming in data, they're starting to realize we want more control, more transparency.
It's a start. And hey, maybe these conversations we're having, this whole deep dive,
Maybe it'll push more companies to think that way, be more upfront about what they're doing with our data.
we can hope. But in the meantime, if there's one thing to take away from all this,
Stay curious, right? Stay informed.
exactly.
Oh, and maybe, just maybe,
Read the fine print.
for once. Until next time, everybody.